Welcome back to BYoungMinistry.com, to another blog and to another podcast. Welcome to those who access the podcast through Apple Podcasts, Rumble, Spotify, and YouTube. Today we continue our study of the Gospel according to Matthew. We're in chapter 27, verses 27 through 31, which reads, "Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. When they had twisted a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand. And they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, 'Hail, King of the Jews!' Then they spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they took the robe off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to be crucified." That's Matthew chapter 27, verses 27 through 31. Today we return to our study of Matthew chapter 27, where the Lord Jesus has been beaten to a pulp, and Pilate has now issued a decree to have him crucified. Unbeknown to him, Pilate was a major actor in the struggle between good and evil that day. Coming into view was the cross for the Lord Jesus Christ. All of the events of today's passage merely led up to that most crucial moment of all of human history. In verse 27 of today's passage we read, "Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around him." The term praetorium refers to the official residence or headquarters of a Roman governor, in this case Pontius Pilate, the prefect of Judea during the time of Jesus' trial. Pilate's praetorium was the setting for the trial and the sentencing of the Lord Jesus. It was there that Pilate turned the Lord over to his soldiers, who were nothing short of brutal. There was an ancient Roman game that was played in those days, and it is alluded to here. This game was called hot hand, which was when the guards took a prisoner and blindfolded him. Then they formed a circle around the prisoner, and they placed him in the center of the circle. Then all but one of the soldiers would take turns at hitting the prisoner. Then they took the blindfold off him and they asked, "Which one of us didn't hit you?" If the prisoner guessed incorrectly, they'd do it all over again until he got it right. In verses 28 and 29 of today's passage we read, "And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. When they had twisted a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand. And they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, 'Hail, King of the Jews!'" The Roman soldiers mockingly placed a scarlet robe on the Lord Jesus. Then they placed a crown of thorns on his head. This crown was the product of the fall of rebellious man. This crown included the curse and the honor. It has always been impossible for any human to earn the honor of a personal relationship with God by atoning for our sin. This is why the Lord Jesus came. He came to atone for our sin, and as a result, we have the chance of being made right in God's eyes simply by believing in his sacrifice on our behalf. Only the Lord Jesus could resolve our sin and curse problem. Bowing before the Lord Jesus, the Roman soldiers mockingly hailed him as a king. They also beat and spat on him. Then they mockingly placed a crown of thorns on him. They couldn't see the irony therein because they lacked a biblical theology. It was man's sin that brought thorns into existence in the first place. And in just a few hours, the Lord Jesus would reverse the curse that had been illustrated by these thorns. The mistreatment of the Lord Jesus was for all who would believe, because all of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. This means that we are all guilty of rebellion against God, which has caused us to not be able to dwell in His presence. One sign that we have come into right relationship with God is that we no longer blame someone else for our sinfulness. Personal responsibility for our sin aligns with what the Bible calls confession. Agreeing with God's assessment in all areas of our lives is a possible sign that we have been born again. And if we do not see ourselves standing there with the fickle crowd and the cruel soldiers, full of hostility and hatred for the Lord Jesus, we really do not understand the nature and the depth of our sinfulness or the necessity of the cross. Sin was not something created or authored by God. Rather, God created a good universe and good human beings. Sin is the product of man thinking he could make it through his life on his own without God. When the soldiers took the scarlet robe off the Lord Jesus, it was quite painful for him. When blood coagulates, it acts like a glue. Once they placed that robe on his bloodied body and the blood dried, the garment adhered to his body. And when they took the robe off, they ripped the fleshly mended scabs off his body with it. That pain only added to the misery he was going through that day. But it would get worse when they led him to be crucified. In verses 30 and 31 of today's passage, we read, "Then they spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they took the robe off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to be crucified." The reed with which they struck the Lord Jesus served as a symbol of mockery and humiliation. This reed was a flimsy, narrow stick used symbolically by the Roman soldiers in order to belittle the Lord Jesus. In verse 29, the reed was even placed in his right hand. Inadvertently, the placing of that reed in the right hand of the Lord Jesus fulfilled a prophetic imagery given by Isaiah of the suffering servant. In Isaiah chapter 42, in verse 3, we read, "A bruised reed he will not break, and a dimly burning wick he will not extinguish. He will faithfully bring forth justice." Crucifixion was not invented by the Romans. The Persians invented it, but the Romans perfected it. The Persians originally invented crucifixion because they thought the earth was holy and sacred, and they did not want to taint the earth. So, the Persians elevated the guilty ones off the sacred earth for their death. Crucifixion disappeared from man's purview until the Romans rediscovered it. And when they perfected it, the Romans crucified thousands upon thousands. I find it most instructive that among so many crucified, only one is remembered as such. The cross of the Lord Jesus Christ was made of two parts, the vertical stake and the horizontal crossbeam. The cross is the greatest axis ever known to man. It is the cross of the Lord Jesus Christ that made it possible for all of mankind to pass out of the darkness of death into the light of His life. This is done only by coming into a personal relationship with God, by believing in the work of His Son on the cross. While this world grades according to the curve, God grades according to the cross. The Bible is clear that the only passageway into this personal relationship with God is none other than the Lord Jesus Christ. My friends, I trust this blog and this podcast are helping you with your walk with the Lord. If I can be of further assistance to you, shoot me an email at BYoungMinistry@gmail.com. Hey, have a great day.